in Proverbs, at Proverbs, whichever of those preposition works. Um, Anyhow, we're going to go ahead and just jump right into things since we're running a few minutes late. Let's go ahead and pray. Blessed Lord, we give thanks to you for your wisdom. We ask that you would enlighten and open our hearts and our minds through your wisdom so that we may live faithful lives according to your will. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Alrighty. So we're picking up here with verse 24 in chapter 19. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish and will not even bring it back to his mouth. Talk about lazy. Strike a scoffer, and the simple will learn prudence. Reprove a man of understanding, and he will gain knowledge. He who does violence to his father and chases away his mother is a son who brings reproach. Is a son who brings shame and reproach. Cease to hear instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. A worthless witness mocks at justice, and the mouth of the wicked devours iniquity. Condemnation is ready for scoffers, and beating for the backs of fools. Alrighty, so we have this initial statement with of extreme laziness. And can you imagine being so lazy that you put your hand in the dish and you can't even bring it back to put the food in your mouth? I mean, oi. I don't exercise a lot, but I still get that kind of exercise. I, it's really, I mean, that's just the height of laziness. But we're trying to get across the idea of the sluggard, the unfaithful, the laziness leads to death. Is really, I think, the idea that we should bring away from that, especially considering that the following verses bring about this idea that discipline, that teaching can change a person. So, having the lazy equal death there with, because really, when you have somebody who cannot even put food into their mouth, what's going to happen to them? Death. Okay. So it's not a giant leap to say, okay, the lazy person's dead. With that in mind, that brings about the urgency and necessity of teaching. Now, as Solomon is teaching his son, he is teaching him in the course of, say, the reaction of a king, which is fitting. I mean, Solomon is king. Solomon is going to expect his son to rule. And so he does take something of a punitive approach here. Strike a scoffer, and the simple will learn prudence. Reprove a man of understanding, and he will gain knowledge. With the striker, striking the scoffer, even the simple will learn prudence. What he is communicating there is in the idea that so you would have something along the lines of, well, let's go with the Nasser case. What can we learn from the Nasser case? Well, you mess with little girls, you're going to go to jail. Which should you not do? Mess with little girls. Don't mess with them. So it communicates that there are repercussions to immoral behavior. So, in witnessing the execution of justice, we learn not to act immorally. This is the kind of idea that Strike the Scoffer in The Simple Will Learn Prudence is attempting to communicate. At the same time, it's not just looking at punitive. With Strike, you do have the punitive. With Reprove, though, you have the teaching. If you have somebody who is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you teach them, one who is understanding, or as more modern ways of saying things are teachable. I think we could look at understanding in that sense, that as a person who is teachable, they will gain knowledge. So what is being communicated here is, the teaching to change people. It also makes a point of, we'll go back to this slide, of you are what you eat. The mouth of the wicked devours iniquity. Really, that is just a way of saying you are what you eat. You are what you consume. If you are consuming immorality, you will act immorally. One of the things that has been noticed, and I know people tend to downplay it, and I think it's largely because they don't want to end up thinking about still having an influence and making a formation on how you think, how you react, and how you are going to act. Boy, did I just repeat myself. So let's put it this way. If you are, say, consuming, let's go with a stereotype here, and I'm not gonna, let me go with a generality, not a stereotype, a generality, because really this applies to any number of genres of music. If you are consuming music that largely treats men or women as sexual objects, you will end up treating men and women as sexual objects. It may not be as, say, overtly as my mind just went blank on the particular psychological disorder. I hate it when this happens. Yeah. It's all these gray hairs, I'm losing my thoughts here. But this is going to drive me nuts that I can't remember the particular disorder. It may not be as pronounced as, say, we'll go with a personality type, say, as Nasser, who is abusing people. But it is going to form your thoughts and how you interact with people. They have noticed that there's been a change in how people are reacting with intimacy and sexuality with the rising consumption of porn. and the expectations of people as they're engaging in a sexual activity is highly corresponding with the let's just say dehumanizing that is porn. So you that has been noticed, or let's say here, let's another route. If you are consuming music that tends to be depressing, it covers sad topics. It covers feeling isolated, all those different things. How are you going to feel? I would be willing to bet, if I were a betting man, to say that if you spent like 30 days listening to that, you're going to feel pretty depressed by the end of those 30 days. Time listening to music that is angry, you're going to find yourself more of an angry type person. If you want to get political, listen to music that is primarily left wing or right wing, and examine your politics by the end of, say, 30 days of listening to either one of those. And the same thing goes with TV, it goes with books. They form our thoughts. One of the things that has been noticed that everybody keeps comparing everything now to Harry Potter. What is the books that most people have read in the last how long has Harry Potter been out? 15, 20 years? It's the Harry Potter series. So what? Of course, everybody's that's going to form their thoughts. Seriously, you have people trying to figure out whether or not Donald Trump is Lord Voldemort. That's the kind of thing that happens. So you are what you eat. You are what you consume. Even in my own personal life, I can notice a difference when I spend time listening primarily to one of my favorite groups, Koine. I mean, when I'm listening to that frequently, Koine, by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar, they're a band that does a lot of contemporary arrangements of church hymns, including a few original pieces of their own. Pretty good stuff. I'd recommend them to anybody who's interested in that kind of thing. When I'm listening to that primarily, there is more of a sense of peace. They're singing the hymns. They're singing about the gospel, and the gospel gives peace. Now, if I was to say and put on, say, some of Demon Hunter, which is a Christian hardcore metal band, there's still, you just don't quite really have that message of hope. That's more of a fighting attitude. Let's take the word as Satan kind of is kind of the viewpoint there. I end up feeling more high strung. So music has an effect. And so does TV and everything else, books. Alright, moving onwards. Now, something I want to point out here. In our translations, there we go. We have. What? Stop that. Oh, now it won't erase what I wanted to erase. Come on, erase. Really? There we go. Alright, to hear. Cease to hear instruction, my son. Okay. The word here is stronger. what we have here in the Hebrew, it's a compound word. So, uh, what happens here is, let's see if I can draw the line. No, go away. You got a compound word. So we have, stop it. We have man. That's called. We have lo, which is that funny looking little squiggly letter there, and then we have the word Shema. Lo is the negating word in Hebrew. So lo Shema would mean to not hear, or no hearing, or no listening, that kind of idea. But what we miss here, though, in this particular translation of translating it here, which is technically correct, is the deeper semantic meaning of the word Shema, because it is more than just simple hearing, more than simple listening. It is to hear and inwardly digest, that we are to receive this auditory information and have it come in and be a part of us. So when we hear this passage in cease to hear instruction, we should have this idea of not only just not hearing good things, but also hearing good things and having them affect us. Let me put it this way. You can listen to something and not actually hear it. One of the things that I notice is I frequently will put on like podcasts and things when I'm working on sermons and other stuff. Partly just for some background noise, also because maybe they're covering a topic that's of interest to me. And as I'm working, I'm listening, but I could not tell you what I heard. In fact, there have been times when I've tried doing this multitasking where I had to stop and go back and go, what did I just hear? I honestly don't recall hearing a thing. It's one of the reasons why when I'm just trying to do noise, I put on just simple instrumental music. Because I'm not going to hear the words anyways. But what's going on here is that even though I'm being exposed to it, it's having no effect because nothing's going basically past the eardrums. And the brain is registering there is noise, but there's nothing. You could look at it this way. It's something similar to, say, the effect of going and listening to a pastor preach. And then after you walk away from the service, you couldn't remember a thing that the pastor said. Now, sometimes that's because the pastor just did not have well-organized thoughts and it was not conducive to being remembered. But it's also an effect of the fact that if we are not actively engaged, we're not going to remember. It's something that plagues couples. I mean, we hear each other, but we actually listen to each other. So when Solomon is ceased to hear, he is saying, if you cease to listen and inwardly digest, to take it in, what is being given to you, it's going to go badly. Cease to hear my instruction, my son, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. Ouch. Alright, moving onwards, because I want to make sure we get through this. Wine is a mocker, a strong drink a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. The terror of a king is like a growling of a lion. Whoever provokes him to anger forfeits his life. It is an honor for a man to keep aloof from strife, but every fool will be quarreling. The sluggard does not plow in the autumn. He will seek at the harvest and have nothing. The purpose of a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Many a man proclaims his own steadfast love, but a faithful man who can find? Okay, so with verse 1 here, chapter 20, God gets a little punny. It's one that you're going to miss if you don't read Hebrew, which is why I'm very thankful for the guys who do. The literal translation is, as is in the ESV, is a person is led astray. That is literal. However, the structure and what it says is highly related to being to meander, to being intoxicated. In fact, the phrase is actually used in places where it means to be intoxicated. So essentially, God is basically using a pun to communicate just how messed up things are going to be. So what we have here is wine is a mocker and strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is meandering drunkenly by it is not wise. Also, I should point out, is not wise. The way it's phrased, it can also mean will not become wise. So basically, if you're drunk as a skunk, you're not going to grow in faith. You're not going to be wise. So don't be getting drunk. Strong drink, I'm just going to bring this up because people will ask that question, what is meant by strong drink? It means something that is fermented from grain. So there is actually some debate as to whether or not that's wine is a mocker and beer is a brawler. I think I know Steinman would argue beer is a legitimate translation, and I think I've seen it elsewhere. It could also go wine is a mocker and whiskey is a brawler. But they didn't have whiskey back those days. They had other grain alcohols. Whiskey's more in Irish, Scottish, and thus American affection. But anyhow, we're not here for a lesson in alcohol. I know. I hate to disappoint, but anyhow, I just wanted to point out here the pun that is involved here, partly because I've seen this passage used quite frequently to tell people that it is sinful to drink. Taking into account the pun, the point here is not so much as the drink itself, but the intoxication. Which would actually bring it better into line with other passages of the Bible, like where Paul tells Timothy to take a little wine with his water to help his upset tummy. That would not be a conducive statement if, there's like the straight forbidding of wine. Now, the point here is to not be led astray by him, to not be given to meander in drunkenness. I love that phrase, meander in drunkenness. I mean, really, that's a great picture right there, because you get that picture of the guy stumbling around, completely unable to control himself, and just going into everything and anything. I mean, you almost have this picture of this guy is going to fall into a dumpster. So, a great picture, great pun that the Lord gives to us here to illustrate the dangers of some things. And moving on, it is an honor for a man to keep aloof from strife. Now, this is not saying that it isn't saying to avoid strife, because honestly, we're not going to be able to avoid it, but we're not to seek out strife. If strife comes our way, we deal with it, but we're not going to go seeking it out. Um, say groups of people who are, I've run into people where they just seem to thrill in the causing of problems. And I remember years ago having a client whose big thing in the world was to cause people to be shocked.
Antagonizer.
Yeah, an antagonizer, and just stir up trouble. Honestly, Twitter is like a great antagonizer. I think it's honestly every day I keep thinking, you know what, I'm gonna log off, and this will be the last time I ever get on it. And one of these days, it's gonna finally be true, because honestly, sometimes it's just not worth it. Frequently, it's not worth it. All right, and we're gonna have to wrap up there. Well, I'm going to go a little bit further. A man of understanding will draw out the purpose of the other man. Really, that honestly, from Bev Yankee, this is one of her favorite things she tells us at Doxology. That is interesting. Tell me more. It's a great question. And actually, in many ways, go a long ways towards diffusing strife. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Blessings to you.